Hello, fellow translators. Today I'm going to be talking to you about something which might seem a bit odd. And so anyway, let me tell you how I came across this and why I came across my radar. Basically, I was talking to a friend of mine who's not a freelancer. She works for a company. She works in HR, and she was going through some resumes. And there was a resume by someone who had worked as a freelancer for a while, and she just had some questions because a lot of the stuff seemed very odd. In fact, then she looked into some of the claims that this guy had made, and they were obviously he'd made them up or exaggerated too much, or anyway, it was BS what he'd written. And she was like, I don't know how to evaluate this because it seems like BS, but there's no one I can call really because he worked for himself. He didn't work for a company, and it's very hard to look into. And so it got us into this whole discussion. And so that's why I want to talk about it. As freelancers, we really have to have our own moral compass because we don't have a company there. When you have a company behind you, you kind of have, it's kind of a wall you can lean back on, yeah, to kind of face the world and everything else. Because in a way, it gives you a foundation. You can say, yeah, I worked for whatever company, GE, and this was my position in GE. I was product manager of this. Okay, everyone kind of, even if they don't know what it means, they know it means something because it was GE. On the other hand, if you worked in your own company and you were like, I was, well, anyone working for their own company can be CEO. They just need to print out the business cards like Mark Zuckerberg did in the social network. I'm CEO, bitch. And so it really doesn't mean anything. And so that's why you kind of need to be careful about stuff like that. When you work on your own, you don't have the excuse of, you don't have the whole company behind you kind of giving you legitimacy for what you do. You also don't have the excuse that the whole company, that, the boss kind of told you what to do. And so even if you did something a bit iffy or it sounds a bit iffy, and you can say, well, that's how we did things. That's how it was done. You were supposed to do stuff like that. Like there were companies that I know, companies I've worked in, where they would, whenever they tried to do PR and stuff like that, they would kind of get in touch or as non-company personnel and try to talk to media people about that company as other people or stuff like that. Also, when you're doing competitive intelligence, a lot of times in companies, you try to approach a competitor's company and pretend like you're not part of the company you're working for, stuff like that. Like you hear about stuff like that all the time, but it's considered, since you're working under the guise of the company and they're giving you legitimacy to do that, it's kind of okay. Obviously, there are limits to that, but you kind of have this idea. But when you do it on your own, no one's giving you that legitimacy. So in a way, I've found you need to have higher moral standards when you work on your own, because people kind of, if they start assuming bad things about you, they'll just assume the worst. They'll realize, oh wait, this person has no one holding them back. They're kind of just doing whatever they want because they work on their own. So if they see one little sort of bad thing, they'll assume, oh wait, I can't trust anything this guy does or says or whatever. And that's why I say it's a bit iffy. It's a bit hard to bring. It's hard to articulate what I'm trying to say in this sense. And there's probably a better way to do it, and probably smarter people than I can do it. But like the issue that my friend had with this guy's resume, as soon as she saw something that was a bit off, she asked me because I can deal with freelancers, and I'm like, look, I have to agree. And the problem is when you see one thing that's a bit off, you kind of have to assume everything's off. And she's like, okay, so everything that's on this resume that I cannot verify, I have to assume is BS then, because one thing was BS. So how do I know anything else isn't BS? And yeah, that's true. There's no way around that. So that's why you really need to be able to back up everything you say, and you really need to kind of have this high moral standard when you work on your own, because it is so easy to BS. It is so easy to just make up stuff or exaggerate way too much about stuff or whatever, because no one's holding you back. And you can kind of print out your own business card, say you're managing director of whatever incorporated, and pretend like you are, and you have to back it up with facts, with real life things, with accomplishments and stuff you've done. because otherwise it doesn't mean anything. And people are going to be very quick not only to catch up on that, but then to assume that everything else has no meaning, unless you can really verify it with someone. So you really need to be careful because it can be one of the quickest ways to destroy your reputation if you have something that sounds a bit off or a bit too exaggerated or a bit too out there to be real. And unfortunately, and you see this all the time, like when you see some like 18-year-old who says, "I'm CEO of blah 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 company," and you're like, "Well, is it okay? You printed out business cards, but if I haven't heard about you in the news, chances are, or they could be legitimately a CEO of a company, but that's why usually most people would think, okay, they just printed out their business cards, and that's it, or it's their dad's company, or they kind of just set up something online and called it whatever company, but they're actually just I don't know, or they're working as a freelancer but calling it a company or something like that, and it can be kind of iffy, and people's radars are really kind of tuned into stuff like that. It's, especially nowadays when people can kind of call themselves whatever they want. So just keep that in mind. I think it's always better to be a bit humble. And I run an agency. I introduce myself as a freelance translator who has a small agency or boutique agency. I use one of those words because I try to make it smaller. I do this for other reasons as well because I feel like it kind of gives a more personal touch and people appreciate that and stuff like that. But, I could just say, oh, we have offices here and in Switzerland and Taiwan because we have, we have a place where mail can go and people can get phone calls. But I don't, we don't really have, it's basically me, with the freelancers that I work with. And so I don't necessarily want to sound too big. And that's another thing. People who are big don't try to sound big. The only people who try to sound big are people who are small. People who are big don't have to try to sound big because they're big already. So, that's the other thing. When you're trying to sound big, people assume you're small because those are the only people who try to sound big. Anyway, so that's just a way to say you need to have this moral compass up, and it needs to be up not only because it's morally and ethically the right thing to do, but also it can really destroy your reputation. Not to mention of other freelancers, who kind of are in the same boat as you and they get a bad rep because you sound kind of shady or like a scammer or something like that. And so I think it's a very important thing to keep in the back of your mind at all times. Don't try to puff up what you do. You just do it. Do the work. And then, once you've done the work, you can put it on your resume. You can put it that you've done that, but don't try to sound cooler than you are. You'll get there. Don't be in too much of a rush. Anyway, that's pretty much it. Hopefully you find this useful, and I do hope that it's applied because I think it's something that sometimes is needed. Look, the vast majority of people I deal with, translators I deal with, freelancers I deal with, are really honest, and actually I think are really good people, and they're good at being honest. But you do find those people every now and then who kind of exaggerate and really stretch things out. And so I'm just telling you not to do that. Don't be influenced by that. And if you find yourself exaggerating a bit, because I know very often, it's like when I was in school, people are like, oh, they try to make your resume sound better by exaggerating this and that. I think people's radars are really like in tune to that these days, especially with all this stuff online. So just be careful about that, and I wouldn't do it. So yeah, hopefully you found this useful, and don't forget to like, thumbs up, all that good stuff. And don't forget, if you leave comments, once again, feel free to leave comments, and put your language combination in parentheses, just because I think it'd be interesting to see what other language combinations other people have, and it'll help with the conversation. And anyway, that's pretty much it. I'll see you in the next video. Okay, thanks. Bye. Oh, and savedum.